Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sky. I'm a VTuber with also an interest in historical topics of various forms, and welcome back to Historical Vtuber Talks. Now in this video I'm going to be exploring the historical and also somewhat mythological character of Guan Yu, as popularized in the novel The Romans of the Three Kingdoms. I'm going to be examining what type of weapons or what type of polearm specifically that Guan Yu might have actually used, and examining the attribution of the very popular Guan Dao to Guan Yu, and whether this has any basis in history or not. So without further ado, let us get straight into it. So obviously the weapon that is popularly attributed to Guan Yu and associated with Guan Yu is the Guan Dao, which has also gotten its name from its association with Guan Yu. However, this association is not in fact an association that was done during the time that Guan Yu lived, and there's a very simple reason for this. The Guan Dao as a whole was a weapon that did not exist during the time of Guan Yu in the Han Dynasty, or during the fall of the Han Dynasty. The Guan Dao, or as it's known by its other name, the Yan Yu Dao. The Yan Yu Dao translates more or less to crescent moon saber or crescent moon blade. The word Dao does not translate neatly into either saber or blade because it does not strictly refer to curved type of things like sabers, but it also does not really strictly mean blade. So either translation is not entirely correct, but it's the closest we can get. So I'm going to call it a crescent moon saber from now on. Or simply as the Chinese name, which is the Yan Yu Dao. Mentions of the Yan Yu Dao go back to the Song Dynasty. However, it is hard to say when exactly the Yan Yu Dao in polearm form appeared. I personally have an idea of this, which I could potentially explore in a future video, but I'm not nearly as well versed with Chinese weapons and polearms as I am with European weapons and polearms. So I might not make that video, I might make that video, we'll see. What is pretty clear is that it definitely is a weapon that in historical records or in depictions does not show up before the Song Dynasty. Now, the Song Dynasty is obviously over half a millennium after the time of Guan Yu. So where did this association with Guan Yu and the Guan Dao, or the Yan Yu Dao, start? Well, it starts unsurprisingly with the Romans of the Three Kingdoms novel. The Romans of the Three Kingdoms was written in the early Ming Dynasty in the 14th century. And in it, the weapon that Guan Yu is wielding is specifically named as a Qinlong Yan Yu Dao, which translates more or less to a green dragon crescent moon saber. In the Ming Dynasty, we do know that Yan Yu Dao did refer to this type of glaive. Its association was done in, for example, the Wujing Zongyao. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce that right, which is a military manual dating back to the Song Dynasty at the very least. However, most illustrations of the weapons are from the Ming Dynasty, because this is a treatise that has been like reproduced over and over with new illustrations or whatever. And in the Wujing Zongyao, we do have the association of the Yan Yu Dao with this type of glaive. So we do know that Guan Yu in the Romans of the Three Kingdoms novel, who is mentioned to use a Yan Yu Dao, is in fact using a glaive. However, this is also an association that was started in the Romans of the Three Kingdoms novel in the 14th century. Prior to this, there is no association of Guan Yu with the Guan Dao. Why this association was made in the first place is anyone's guess. It might simply be that by the time of the Ming Dynasty, the Yan Yu Dao is a very popular type of weapon. Moreover, it being a very popular type of weapon, in the Ming Dynasty we also have examples that are fairly decorated, with like dragon motifs and whatever not. So following this, it of course makes sense to give such a, well, auspicious weapon to a character such as Guan Yu. And this association becomes very popular in Ming China and also in Qing Dynasty China. By the Qing Dynasty, the Yan Dao was not really a popular battlefield weapon anymore. However, by that time, the Guan Dao or Yan Dao had sort of gotten this role as a commander's sort of weapon or a general's weapon, and was often present in military exams where generals had to swing extremely overweighted Guan Dao. Since Guan Yu in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel was said to use an extremely overweight Guan Dao, weighing, I don't remember how much it weighs, like 20 kilos or something like that. So in the Qing Dynasty, they had military exams where people needed to wield heavily overweighted Guan Dao, which has also given rise to the myth that Guan Dao as a whole would be that heavy. They would not. It is purely a ceremonial / military exam thing that starts in the Qing Dynasty. The battlefield weapons of the Yan Dao or the Guan Dao would obviously be weighted like normal weapons. But now that it was established that the Guan Dao or Yan Dao was not a thing during the Han Dynasty or the Three Kingdoms period, what type of polearms could Guan Yu potentially use? Before I talk about what polearms are present during the Han Dynasty, I should mention that there is an earlier attribution of a pair of weapons to Guan Yu, recorded by the scholar Tao Hongjing in the Guan Dao, recorded in this book that I cannot really pronounce properly. I believe it is pronounced the Guan Dao. I'm very sorry if that's wrong. From the 5th or early 6th century AD. In it, he attributes or he states that Guan Yu forged a pair of Dao from iron ore he harvested himself. By this time period, Dao did not have the association of referring to a polearm. It had the association of referring to, well, single-handed or maybe potentially two-handed, but I don't believe two-handed Dao were around during this time. It's referring to single-handed sabers of a type similar to this, which I'm showing in the picture. This might also be what was referenced back to in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which was written about 900 years afterwards. Let's talk about polearms during the Han Dynasty. There were a few popular polearms during the Han Dynasty. One of them is, of course, simple spears. Spears are surprisingly probably not the most popular polearm during the Han Dynasty that we can find in sources, but they are around. So a spear is definitely something that Guan Yu could have used. However, if we want to stick with the theme of giving him a polearm that is meant not only to thrust with, but also to swing, we have a few other options. The very popular Han Dynasty option would be the Ji. This is often called a halberd or a dagger axe by a lot of English speakers. I personally do not like translating it to either, because it's not really a halberd, and you can call it a dagger axe, but I don't really consider it an axe either. So I would suggest that this is should be called the Ji. There is no need to translate the weapon. But the Ji is a very, very popular weapon in ancient China, especially in the Han Dynasty. It appears, early forms appear during the Qin Dynasty already. And in the Han Dynasty, the long Ji was a very, very popular infantry polearm. So the Ji is definitely a polearm that can be given to Guan Yu. However, there's another polearm which is potentially less known of, not in China. It's a very popular polearm depicted in China, but I haven't heard nearly as many people in the West that know about this. This is called a Sha. It also has an earlier variant that is called a Pi, and these are sort of cutty spears, sort of sword spear, sword staff-like weapons. The Pi appears during the Qin Dynasty and potentially earlier during the Warring States period, and is often made of bronze. It does not have a crossguard. It is simply a spear with a more sword-like blade, similar to a partisan perhaps. The P then develops into the Shah. During the Han Dynasty, this weapon is usually made up of an iron or steel blade, and moreover, it tends to have a crossguard of bronze, which gives it a very distinctive appearance. And this is also a weapon which is pretty popular in the Han Dynasty. So this is another weapon that you could attribute to Guan Yu. And personally, it's probably my favorite Han Dynasty weapon. I of course really like the G as well, but the Shah is just really, really cool to me. I love the design, I love the contrast of having a metal, iron or steel blade and having a bronze crossguard, which makes for a really, really striking combination. Absolutely adore this weapon, and if I were to attribute any weapon to Guan Yu, keeping in line with this popular depiction of wielding a Guan Dao, I would probably opt to give him a Shah and any historical depiction. Obviously, he's not associated with any of these polearms, historically speaking. However, he would probably have used one of these. But as I said, I personally really love the Shah, and I personally really love imagining a more historically accurate version of Guan Yu using this weapon. So, that was all I had to say for this video. I hope you enjoyed this talk on Chinese polearms. I might make a video going more into the history of the Han Dynasty. However, as I said, I don't know nearly enough about this weapon as I would wish to, so I'm not sure whether I should make such a video or not. If I do make such a video, it's definitely going to be with disclaimers that I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all some other time. Bye.